So just like in 1 Timothy chapter 3, Paul is going to teach Timothy in chapter 5 that it's important to take care of church leaders. As he says, starting in verse 1, do not rebuke an older man, but encourage him as you would a father, younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, younger women as sisters, in all purity. And later in verse 17, let the elders who rule well be considered worthy of double honor, especially those who labor in preaching and teaching. For the scripture says, you shall not muzzle an ox when it treads grain, and the laborer deserves his wages. So what Paul is telling Timothy here is firstly that we should be taking care of everybody in our church, treating them as we would our family, again carrying over the theme of the family of God being the church. And then he says later that we should be taking care of our church leaders, especially if those leaders are taking on the jobs of preaching and teaching. He's saying that they deserve their wages. They deserve the work, the reward for the work that they've given. In the modern church, we need to make sure that we are taking these lessons into account. We should be treating everyone in the church we meet as brother or sister, mother or father, and we should be taking good care of our pastors. Now, Paul also teaches in this chapter the importance of taking care of those who can't take care of themselves. Honor widows who are truly widows, but if a widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to show godliness to their own household and to make some return to their parents, for this is pleasing in the sight of God. She who is truly a widow, left all alone, has set her hope on God and continues in supplications and prayers night and day, but she who is self-indulgent is dead even while she lives. Command those things as well, so that they may be without reproach. But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. So, as I said, Paul cares about taking care of the widows, of those who can't take care of themselves. But he also believes that members of the church who have family who are widows, firstly have a responsibility to take care of the widows in their family. If every member of the church takes care of the widows that are their own relatives, firstly, then that's less strain on the church who is taking care of the widows who can't take care of themselves. Paul is saying, if you don't take care of the widows in your own house, you're worse than an unbeliever. He's saying every believer has full responsibility to take care of those who can't take care of themselves within their own household. And Paul also teaches later about widows that some widows don't necessarily need to be taken care of. And those widows should not be signed on to be enrolled to be help in the church, because that may be a stumbling block for them. Refuse to enroll younger widows, for when their passions draw them away from Christ, they desire to marry and so incur condemnation for having abandoned their former faith. As Paul mentions earlier, the widow who has no hope for anyone but God puts their full hope in God. But the widow here is putting hope in marriage. And Paul is saying that that is a big, big problem. Besides that, they learn to be idlers, going about from house to house, and not only idlers, but also gossips and busybodies, saying what they should not. So I would have younger widows marry, bear children, manage their households, and give the adversary no occasion for slander, for some have already strayed after Satan. So Paul is saying that some widows in the church may have actually strayed from the faith because of their unwillingness to do according to what they've been called by being enrolled on this widow help. I think it's important to learn from this passage that if we are in need, it's okay to ask the church for help. But we should also be mindful that if we can help someone, we should stand up and do that, especially if that's a member of our own household. All in all, we should be sure to avoid doing anything that's going to cause a stumbling block for us in our faith.